Hey y'all, it's with our Bright Bernie, and I thought I'd just get on here and have a little bit of a yarn to acknowledge, celebrate, and have a real chat about International Day of Disabled Peoples, which was on the 3rd of December, just this week on. And I've had a migraine for like over a week, which causes my spine to swell up, causes all of my lymphs to swell up, causes the connective muscle tissue in my entire body to inflame, makes my brain swell, well, more that it creates extra plasma, extra fluid around my brain, particularly my fontanelle, where it creates a whole bunch of pressure. The irony, of course, is that many gifted people, I'm talking magic, gifted, people with insight, intuition, telepathy, third eyesight, historically often have medical conditions, complex medical conditions. And that's also the case with a lot of artists, a lot of amazing artists, a lot of really influential artists, a lot of artists that were very unconventional and different at the time. Turned out that they all had special medical conditions. Yeah, so I just really wanted to say that it's not safe for disabled people in so-called Australia at the moment. I have an incredibly high risk of getting COVID. And I'm walking around a city where everyone just wants to pretend it doesn't exist. Almost no one's wearing face masks, where people just want to like party and be pretending that there's not an apocalypse going on, whatever. I've been a disability advocate for a real long time, disability rights advocate, disabled activist for a really long time. And since in the last 2 or 3 years, the abuse and discrimination towards, the abuse and discrimination towards disabled people has just gotten so over the top, so hyper reactive from able-bodied people, afraid of their own mortality or whatever the fuck, that I don't talk about being sick anymore online. I don't bother, because what's the point when able-bodied people just project their own fear, their own issues with mortality, with their own bad health, blah, blah, blah. They just project it onto you in a way that, like, there's literally people dying, no one wants to talk about it. Everyone wants to pretend it's not happening. And I also just want to say that tough bitches like me apparently aren't allowed to be sick. Apparently the idea that I could have an opinion, be strongly spoken, have my own thoughts, autonomy, opinions about things, somehow for many people they cannot harmonize the idea that I'm also a severely disabled person. So I guess it's just a little reminder, celebrating the International Day of Disabled Peoples, to check your able-bodied privilege. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? You can see my eye sockets are swollen today, which is really painful. It's incredibly painful. And the kind of ideas and notions around beauty and advocacy I think some interesting stuff that doesn't get spoken about. I'm really interested in talking about the way that sex workers get treated in terms of their advocacy, in terms of their activism, um, in comparison, for example, to the way that Aboriginal people are treated with their activism and the way that disabled people are treated, talking about disabled advocacy and activism. I also think it's a really fascinating crossover because a number of sex workers are also disabled and a number of them are also First Nations. So I've been doing a lot of reading, writing, thinking about how activists and marginalized people are kind of constantly trying to convince people who do not live the same lived experience, trying to convince them of our reality. And I just don't do that anymore. I just make art and I just write and I just perform and channel and I have one of the rarest forms of cancer in the world. And I'm not what people want in terms of a disabled voice, in terms of someone you can pity, feel sorry for, in terms of somebody who you can look down upon and see yourself as higher up because you're able-bodied and you're not sick. And I think that really fucks people up, and I think that's a real big problem. And I think that I know that it definitely has a lot to do with me also not having a cock, not being a dude, not being a man. And I am very gender non-conforming, but I'm also a woman. And when women talk about being sick, when women talk about their lived experience, it's a very different reaction. So I send my love to all disabled people at this time. I send extra strength and love to non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, and of course women. And yeah, fuck social media and all of its ableism and the way that it encourages people to be ableist and the way that it either demonizes or dehumanizes disabled people. And to everybody that I have triggered and confronted, whether you're disabled or not, you're welcome. Lots of love from Willa I Kirk Brightburn.